everyone. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. I'm your melanated queen and your hostess, Lil Foxy, aka Seven Wonder. Check us out, y'all. Today's topic, we will be talking about the miseducation of the Negro. Okay? But first, before we get into it, we're going to join hands, bow our heads, and give thanks, you all, just for the necessities in life, for our spiritual warriors, angelic warriors, to our ancestors that are watching out for us. We want to give thanks for the activity of all of our limbs, to be of sound mind, sound judgment, and the fact that we have food, we have somewhere to live, we have somewhere to sleep, we have our loved ones, we have our family, we have colleagues, we have associates, we have reliable transportation. So let's just give thanks that we're able to make it day by day, by and by. Let the church say amen. Without any further ado, let me go ahead and come on camera. You all, Tinkerbell is seated next to me. She is being so needy right now. Okay. So, class is in session today. Class, again, is in session today. Tinkerbell, if you don't stop, I'm going to turn this camera off. Every time I get in here she comes. Class is in session today, and I'm not going to. What I'm not going to do is we're not going to prolong it. We're going to go ahead and share the screen. There is a book that I ordered in 2017. It's on Kindle on Amazon if you wish to order it. And I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully, I'll be able to show you what the cover looks like. But we're going to get into this book because I think it's very, very, very prevalent to what is going on in today's society. Okay. Let's go ahead and share it. We're bringing it up, y'all. Here we go. As you can see, it is titled there, The Miseducation of the Negro. Okay. There it is, y'all. All right. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it today. All right. So I'm trying to think what page I started reading this on. But as you can see, I think it's only 127 pages long. I didn't start from the very beginning, but I did read the beginning of it. But for sake of argument, I'm going to start right here on page 60, you all. I'm going to start right here. So I'm going to say, let me turn the page prior. Okay, so and the reason that I'm going through this is because I think it is a topic, like I said, is very prevalent right now in today's time. A lot is going on in society that needs to be talked about. A lot of people are out here faking it, acting like, they are just living the life, living La Vida Loca. That's not what's going on, okay? All right, so it says the course of these bosses has been interesting. At first, the white man used the Negro leader by giving him a drink occasionally. The next step was to give him sufficient money to set up drinks in the name of the white candidate. When drinking at the expense of the candidate became too common, the politicians fell back on the distribution of funds in small amounts. When this finally proved to be insufficient, however, the politicians had to go a bit further and provide Jim Crow jobs and certain back rooms with the understanding that the functions of the so-called office would be merely nominal and the incumbents would have no close contact with white people. In this stage, the Negroes find themselves today. Like I said, nothing has really changed, okay? Now, a lot of people, if you're not familiar with the term Jim Crow, let's go ahead and look that up because I've heard this terminology used a lot. The Jim Crow laws were state and local laws introduced in the southern United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that enforced racial segregation. All right. And in parentheses, they have Jim Crow being a pejorative term for an African American. Such laws remained in force until 1965. Okay. It says, what was Jim Crow? Under Jim Crow, African Americans were relegated to the status of second class citizens. Jim Crow represented the legitimized of anti Black racism. I don't consider myself an African American. And if you had any sense, I would say that you don't consider yourself an African American either. And the reason that I'm saying that is because we don't come from Africa first and then we're Americans. We're indigenous people of this land. You hear me say it all the time on this channel. We have a claim to this land. You know that song they used to make us sing in school? This land is your land. This land is my land. This land was made for you and me, from California to the New York Islands. Okay. From the Gulf Stream waters. This is all our territory, you all. So don't let anyone tell you that you need to go to Africa. They need to go back to Europe. How about that? Let's continue to go on. Let's continue on here. All right. So where are we now? It says the undesirable aspect of the affair is that the Negro, in spite of the changes from one method of approach to that of another, is never brought into the inner circle of the party with which he is affiliated. He is always kept on the outside and is used as a means to an end. To obtain the meager consideration which he receives, the Negro must work clandestinely back through the back door. It has been unnecessary for the white man to change this procedure, for until recent years, he has generally found it possible to satisfy the majority of Negroes with, excuse me, the few political positions earmarked as Negro jobs, and to crush those who clamor for more recognition. It is unfortunate, too, that such a large number of Negroes do not know any better than to stake their whole fortune on politics. History does not show that any race, especially a minority group, has ever solved an important problem by relying altogether on one thing, certainly not by parking its political strength on one side of the fence because of empty promises. Where do we see this happening, you all? We see it every single year. And are they blowing up your phone like they're blowing up my phone about voting? Empty promises. Every single year, we see that same scenario and nothing changes for us, right? There are Negroes who know better, but such thinkers are kept in the background by the traducers of the race to prevent the enlightenment of the masses. The misleading politicians are the only persons through whom the traducers act with respect to the Negro, and there are always a sufficient number of mentally undeveloped voters who will supply them a large following, as we see it today, for all the Biden supporters, everybody that's a Democrat, even the new Negroes who are elected to office, move back, Tink, are often similarly ununiformed and show a lack of vision. They have given little attention to the weighty problems of the nation. And in the legislative, stop it, move back. And in the legislative bodies to which they are elected, they restrict themselves. You're going to get sprayed. As a rule, to matters of special concern to the Negroes themselves, such as lynching, segregation, and disenfranchisement, which they have all well learned by experience. This indicates a step backwards for the Negroes who sat in Congress and in the state legislatures during the Reconstruction, worked for the enactment of measures of concern to all elements of the population, regardless of color. Historians have not yet forgot what those Negro statesmen did in advocating public education. Let's say that again, public education. Why do I say that? Do you understand that your melanated children are being miseducated purposely in the public school system? I just had a conversation about someone regarding that earlier today. The way they're teaching math, they have overcomplicated every single thing that your child is learning right now in the public school system, from math to reading, which is why there is a high illiteracy rate going on right now in the United States with these children. And a lot of people seem to not care because they're too concerned about rap lyrics and celebrity gossip. Let's continue on. A lot of your celebrities are on the verge of being illiterate. A lot of the rappers that you're listening to are on the verge of being illiterate, but nobody seems to care that they have a great influence on the youth. Like I said, the children are being miseducated purposely. All right, let's keep going, you all. Where was I when I said public education? Okay. All right, so public education, internal improvements, labor arbitration, the tariff, and the merchant marine. Okay, chapter 10, it talks about the loss of vision. History shows then that as a result of these unusual forces in the education of the Negro, he easily learns to follow the line of least resistance rather than battle against odds for what real history has shown to be the right course. So many people are not going to stand up for their rights. They're not going to stand up for their liberation. They're going to go along to get along. We see this on jobs. We see this with people just going with the politicians. They don't want to dirty the waters. They don't want to cause a scene because they just want to have a pretty, even course down to the road of oblivion, even if it leads them nowhere. A mind that remains in the present atmosphere never undergoes sufficient development to experience what is commonly known as thinking. And that's true. Most people don't even use their brains to think because all the thinking is done for them. No Negro, thus submerged in the ghetto, then will have a clear conception of the present status of the race or sufficient foresight to plan for the future. And he drifts so far toward compromise that he loses moral courage. What I just said. They're not going to navigate against the system. They're not going to circumnavigate and go against the system. They're going to go along to get along. It is disgusting. The education of the Negro then becomes a perfect device for control from without. Those who purposely promote it have every reason to rejoice, and Negroes themselves exultingly champion the cause of the oppressor. I actually bookmarked that page, you all. A comparison of the record of the spokesmen of the race today with that of those of the 18th century shows a moral surrender. During the prolonged struggle between the French and English in America, the Negroes held the balance of power at several strategic points and used it accordingly. Today, the Negro finds himself inconsequential because he can be parked on one side of the fence. The same balance of power was evident also during the American Revolution. When Negro soldiers insisted on serving side by side with others, today many Negroes are content as menials in the army. At that time, Negroes preached to mixed congregations. Today, we find Negroes busy separating them. The 18th century Negro resented any such thing as social distinctions. Today, Negroes are saying that they do not want social equality. Negroes of that epoch said with the ancient poet, I am a man and deem nothing that relates to a man a matter of indifference to me. Today, however, the average Negro says, now I am a colored man and you white folks must settle that matter among yourselves. At a still later date, the American Negro showed more courage than he does today with all of his so-called enlightenment. And think about how he said this so-called enlightenment. So when you think about all of these fake woke people, all of these people that have podcasts, everybody that has a microphone and a freaking camera, and they have all of this equipment in the studio, and all they want to talk about is divisiveness. They want to talk about male versus female, female versus male, divisiveness. Let's not take it back to the Willie Lynch syndrome, you all. When the free Negroes were advised 100 years ago to go to Africa, they replied that they would never separate themselves from the slave population of this country, as they were brethren by the ties of consanguinity. I don't even think I pronounced that properly, you all. consanguinity. I don't know what that word is. My apologies. Of suffering and of wrong. Today, however, the Negro in the North turns up his nose at the crude migrant from the South who brings to the North the race problem, but along with it more thrift and actual progress than the Northern Negro ever dreamed of. When again in 1816, free Negroes like Richard Allen, James Forten, and Robert Purvis were referred to as a foreign element whose social status might not be secure in this country instead of permitting the colonizationists to shove them aside as criminals to be deported to a distant shore, they replied in no uncertain terms that this soil in America, which gave them birth, is their only true home. Here their fathers fought, bled, and died for this country, and here they intended to stay. Today, when such things come up, you find Negroes appearing upon the scene to see how much pay they can obtain to assist in the proposed undoing of the race. So basically, they can be bribed to mess up the race to sell their people out, like what we see with the Hollywood celebrities, quote unquote celebrities. Furthermore, emphasizing this thought of resistance, a few years later, Nathaniel Paul, a Baptist preacher of Albany, informed the colonizationists that the free Negroes would not permit their traducers to formulate a program for the race. You may go ahead with your plan to deport this element in order to make slavery secure, he warned, but the free Negroes will never immigrate to Africa. We shall stay here and fight until the foul monster is crushed. Slavery must go. We are still enslaved. Did I believe it would always continue, said he, and that man to the end of time would be permitted with impunity to usurp the same undue authority over his fellow? I would disavow any allegiance or obligation I was under to my fellow creatures or any submission that I owe to the laws of my country. I would deny the superintending power of divine providence in the affairs of this life. I would ridicule the religion of the Savior of the world and treat as the worst of men the ministers of the everlasting gospel. I would consider my Bible as a book of false and delusive fables and commit it to the flames. Nay, I would still go further. I would at once confess myself an atheist and deny the existence of a holy God. And these Negroes of a century ago stood their ground and fought the pro slavery deportationists to a standstill. For the exception of a few pioneers, the immigrants to Liberia were largely slaves manumitted on the condition that they would settle in Africa. These freed men then could have no ideals but those of the slave holding section from which they were sent. They established, therefore, a slaveocracy in Liberia. If Liberia has failed, then it is no evidence of the failure of the Negro in government. It is merely evidence of the failure of slavery. The Negroes attacking Jim Crowism almost a century ago fearlessly questioned the constitutionality of such a provision. Speaking through Charles Lennox Remond of that day, they said there is a distinction between social and civil rights. We all claim the privilege of selecting our society and associations, but in civil rights, one man has not the prerogative to define rights for another. These race distinctions react in all their wickedness, to say nothing of their concocted and systemized odiousness and absurdity upon those who are illiberal and mean enough to practice them. In our day, however, we find some highly educated Negroes approving such Jim Crowism. For example, not many years ago, an outstanding Baptist preacher dabbling in politics in West Virginia suggested to the whites that they enact a Jim Crow car law in that state, and we had difficulty in crushing that sentiment. A few years thereafter, the author heard one of our bishops say that we should not object to such separation, for we want to be by ourselves. When this distinguished churchman died, the traducers of the Negro lauded him to the skies, and thoughtless members of the race, thinking he deserved it, joined in the loud acclaim. And in this way, the large majority of educated Negroes in the United States have accepted segregation and have become its fearless champions. Their filled but undeveloped minds do not enable them to understand that although an opiate furnishes temporary relief, It does not remove the cause of the pain. In this case, we have yielded on principle to satisfy the mob, but have not yet found an ultimate solution of the problem at hand. In our so called democracy, we are accustomed to give the majority what they want rather than educate them to understand what is best for them. So true, you all. We do not show the Negro how to overcome segregation, but we teach them how to accept it as final and just. Numerous results from this policy may be cited. The white laboring man refuses to work with Negroes because of the false tradition that the Negro is an inferior, and at the same time, the Negro, for the same reason, becomes content with menial service and drudgery. The politician excludes the Negro from the councils of his party and from the government because he has been taught that such is necessary to maintain the supremacy of his race. The Negro trained in the same school of thought accepts this as final and contends for such meager consideration as the bosses may begrudgingly grant him. An irate resident in an exclusive district protests against an invasion by Negroes because he has learned that these poverty stricken people are carriers of disease and agents of crime. The Negroes, believing that such is the truth, remain content in the ghetto. How many songs do we hear on the radio, do we hear in rap lyrics promoting the ghetto? It's cool living in the ghetto, rat infestation, crime infestation. There is nothing glamorous about living in the depths of a ghetto. The irrational parent forces the separation of the races in some schools because the child must occupy a seat next to a pupil of tainted African blood. The educated Negro accepts this as inevitable and welcomes the makeshift for his people. Children of Negroes are excluded from the playgrounds because of the assertion that they will contaminate those of the whites. The Negroes, yielding, settle down to a policy of having their children grow up in neglected fashion in the most undesirable part of the city. The Negro is forced to ride in a Jim Crow car, to stamp upon him more easily the badge of his inferiority. The educated Negro accepts it as, as settled and abandons the fight against this social proscription. And thus goes segregation, which is the most far reaching development in the history of the Negro since the enslavement of the race. In fact, it is a sequel of slavery. It has been made possibly by our system of miseducating innocent people who did not know what was happening. It is so subtle that men have participated in promoting it without knowing what they were doing. There are a few defenders of segregation who are doubtless sincere. Although nominally free, they have never been sufficiently enlightened to see that matter other than as slaves. One can cite cases of Negroes who opposed emancipation and denounced the abolitionists. A few who became free re enslaved themselves. A still larger number made no effort to become free because they did not want to disconnect themselves from their masters, and their kind still object to full freedom. How many people do you know are still basically in slavery in these entertainment industries? These Hollywood people that you see are still working for the white man, working for Clive Davis, working under these white labels that are owned by the Europeans. They don't own anything, and they still do the same thing today. This is why they're not owners of NBA leagues. They're not owners of the NFL teams. They rather be a plantation slave, dribbling a ball, throwing a ball up and down a football field, getting hurt and injured, making a few millions while these owners make billions with a B. Okay? Ever since the Civil War, when Negroes were first given a chance to participate in the management of their affairs, they have been inconsistent and compromising. They have tried to gain one thing on one day by insisting on equality for all, while at the same time endeavoring to gain another point the next day by segregation. At one moment, Negroes fight for the principle of democracy, and at the very next moment, they barter it away for some temporary advantage. You cannot have a thing and dispose of it at the same time. So you'll hear a lot of these so called celebrities act like they claim that they want rights for so called Black Lives Matter. You know how I feel about that. But at the same instance, they will still sell you poison to your ears and garbage, telling your children to kill one another in the rap lyrics. For example, because why? Because they're getting a temporary advantage, which means they'll get monetary gain at the moment, and they still go broke. And they're never going to make as much as their counterparts make when it comes to the music industry, when it comes to acting. We've seen so many different examples of this. Just look at Living Single compared to Friends. And Living Single was a way better show, way far more entertaining. Look at the Braxtons. They were making the same amount as some of the cameramen. And look at the Kardashians. They have no freaking talent whatsoever, and they're still on the air. For example, the Negro political leaders of the Reconstruction period clamored for suffrage and the right of holding office, serving in the militia, and sitting on the jury, but few of them wanted white and colored children to attend the same school. When expressing themselves on education, most of them took the position of segregationists, and Charles Sumner, in his fight for the civil right of the Negro, had to eliminate mixed schools from his program, not only because many whites objected, but also because the Negroes themselves did not seem to want them. All of these leaders might not have been looking for jobs in those days, but as nominal freemen who were still slaves, they did not feel comfortable in the presence of their former masters. These timorous men were very much like some Negroes who were employed near the author's home in Virginia. And I'm going to bring up the state Virginia by a Northern farmer because a lot of the slave mentality started right there in Virginia. I used to live, I'm telling you, those people in Virginia are very slave minded. They have a slave mentality. It's disgusting. I had to get away from that place. Who had moved into the state after the Civil War. Excuse me, when breakfast time came the first morning, he called them in to eat at the table with his family. These actual slaves, however, immediately lost their appetite. Listen to this, y'all. Listen to this degeneracy. One finally called the employer aside and settled the matter in another way. He said, "Now, boss, you ain't used to do the rules of this country. You ain't used to the rules of this country." They make him sound very illiterate. "We just can't sit at the table with the white folks. We've been used to eating a cake of bread out yonder between the plow handles. Let's go out there." So he told the slave master, let them go out there because they're not used to eating at the table with the white men, and they feel more comfortable eating out there as slaves. The system therefore has extended from one thing to another until the Negroes today find themselves hedged in by the color bar almost every way they turn and set off by, and set off by themselves. The Negroes cannot learn from the example of others with whom they might come into contact. In the ghetto, too, they are not permitted to construct and carry out a program of their own. These segregating institutions interfere with the development of self help among Negroes. For often, Negroes fail to raise money to establish institutions which they might control, but they readily contribute large sums for institutions which segregate persons of African blood. Denied participation in the higher things of life, the educated Negro himself joins too with ill designing persons to handicap his people by systemized exploitation. We still see this go on today. Feeling that the case of the Negro is hopeless, the educated Negro decides upon the course of personally profiting by whatever he can do and using these people as a means to an end. He grins in their faces while extracting money from them. Hut his heart shows no fond attachment to their despised cause. With a little larger income than they receive, he can make himself somewhat comfortable in the ghetto, and he forgets those who have no way of escape. You see this all the time when people live amongst you and they get a little bit more than what you have, and they feel that they are a little bit higher than you, and they feel okay about selling their own people out because they feel that they don't really care about your struggle. As long as they get a little bit more than you, then they feel like they have an edge over you. It is disgusting. It is sickening. And this is still going on today. Some of this educated class join with unprincipled real estate men in keeping Negroes out of desirable parts of the city and confining them to unsanitary sections. Such persons help the profiteer to collect from Negroes, thus cornered a larger rental than that exacted from whites for the same property. In similar fashion, a Negro minister sometimes goes into a community where the races are moving along amicably together in their churches and rents a shack or an old empty store to start a separate church for quote unquote our people, not to supply any practical need, but to exploit those who have never learned to think. And a lot of melanated people have never learned to think, and they are taken advantage of because they don't use their minds. Professional men, too, walking in their footsteps, impose also upon the poor innocent Negroes who do not know when they are being treated properly and when they are not. But high fees may be obtained from them insomuch as they cannot always go to others for service. Settling in a community with mixed schools, the educated Negro often advocates their separation that his daughter may secure a position in the system. The Negro politician is accustomed to corner the Negro vote by opening a separate office from which he may bargain with the chieftains of the machine for the highest price available. When paid off by some position which is not very lofty, this office holder accepts such employment with the understanding that he will be set off by himself as if he were destructive of the rest of the mankind. In the present crisis, however, the highly educated Negroes find very little to exploit, and in their untoward condition, they have no program of finding a way out. They see numerous instances of Negroes losing their jobs in white establishments. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera on for this one because, y'all, this is still happening today. This is still going on today. Okay, and this is a very prevalent topic happening right now. Okay, it is still happening today. So I'm going to go over this again. In the present crisis, however, the highly quote unquote educated Negroes find very little to exploit, and in their untoward condition, they have no program of finding a way out. They see numerous instances of Negroes losing their jobs in white establishments. Okay, let's continue to read on because it's going to be very important. In fact, these things occur daily. Janitors who have been giving satisfaction are abruptly told that they will no longer be needed. Negro waiters in hotels are being informed that their places will go to white workers. Okay? Negro truck drivers are ordered to step down and let the needy of the other race go up. We hear so much of this that we wonder what the outcome will be. Does that sound familiar to you? Because this takes place every single day, it's never stopped. And the readjustment, of course, when there are fewer opportunities left for those who cannot or do not have the opportunity to operate machines. All right. The Negroes will naturally be turned out of their positions by their employers who think first of their own race. They do not care about you as a melanated individual. All right. You are just a placeholder, and you're basically being used as a machine. And as soon as they can get someone of their own ethnic background to take that position and make money, they're going to get rid of you and look out for their own. This is basically what they're saying. In the ultimate passing of the Depression, however, Negroes will not be much better off when some of the whites now displacing them will rise to higher levels. In the economic order of tomorrow, there will be little use of the factotum or scullion. Man will not need such personal attention when he can buy a machine to serve him more efficiently. This is going on with Amazon. This is going on with a lot of robots that are taking people's jobs. The menial Negroes, the aggregate of parasites whom the highly educated Negro has exploited, will not be needed on tomorrow. What then will become of our highly educated Negroes who have no initiative? We have appealed to the talented 10th for a remedy, but they have nothing to offer. Their minds have never functioned in all this important sphere. The educated Negro shows no evidence of vision. He should see a new picture. The Negroes are facing the alternative of rising in the sphere of production to supply their proportion of the manufacturers and merchants, or of going down to the graves of paupers. The Negro must now do for himself or die out as the world undergoes readjustment. This is happening right now. Do you know there's actually a projection that the government is basically projecting that A certain percentage of melanated individuals will be homeless by 2026. This is actually a targeted projection. They're banking on the fact that melanated people, and they're saying that they're going to be homeless by 2026. That's in 2 years from now, you all, because it's almost the end of 2023. Okay, so either do for yourself or die out. How many of you are trying to start your own businesses who are actually conducting business? It is not a game out here, y'all. It's not a game. It says here, if the whites are to continue for some time in doing drudgery to the exclusion of Negroes, and this happens every single day, they exclude you. The latter must find another way out. Nothing forces this upon one more dramatically than when he learns that white women in Montgomery, Alabama, are coming to the back door of Negro homes asking for their washing. If the whites have reached this extremity and they must be taken care of first, what will be left for the Negroes? Okay, make it clear by no mistake. These people are going to look out for their own. Asians are going to look out for their own communities. Middle Easterns are going to look out for their own. Hispanics are going to look out for their own. Latinos, whites, and Caucasians are going to look out for their own. And y'all think that just because you hear the term Africa, do you understand how big of a continent Africa is? They're going to look out for their own. So if you are Americans, you're indigenous people of here, then you need to be actually coming together instead of going to war with one another with these silly antics, dummies. At this moment, then, the Negroes must begin to do the very thing which they have been taught that they cannot do. They still have some money and they have needs to supply. They must begin immediately to pool their earnings. Okay. And I think, what's his name? Henry Clark talked about this. They must begin immediately to pool their earnings and organize industries to participate in supplying a social and economic demands. If the Negroes are to remain forever removed from the producing atmosphere and the present discrimination continues, there will be nothing left for them to do because they're not going to be here. They're going to be extinct. There is no reason for lack of confidence because of the recent failure of Negro enterprises, although the highly educated Negroes assert the contrary. This lack of confidence is the cause of the failure of these enterprises. If the Negroes had manifested enough confidence in them and had properly supported them, they would have been strong enough to stand the test in the crisis. Negro banks, as a rule, have failed because the people, taught that their own pioneers in business cannot function in this sphere, withdrew their deposits. An individual cannot live after you extract the blood from his veins. The strongest bank in the United States will last only so as long as the people have sufficient confidence in it to keep their money there. In fact, the confidence of the people is worth more than the money. All right, let's read that again. In fact, the confidence of the people is worth more than the money. But melanated people don't seem to get that. Okay, this is why they don't like to support one another. The lack of confidence of the Negro in himself and in his possibilities is what has kept him down. His miseducation has been a perfect success in his respect. Yet it is not necessary for the Negro to have more confidence in his own workers than in others. If the Negro would be as fair to his own as he has been to others, this would be all that is necessary to give him a new lease on life and start the trend upward. Here we find that the Negro has failed to recover from his slavish habit of berating his own and worshiping others as perfect beings. Massa. No progress has been made in this respect because the more education the Negro gets, the worse off he is. He has just had so much longer to learn to decry and despise himself. The race looking to this educated class for a solution of its problems does not find any remedy, and on the contrary, sees itself further and further away from those things to which it has aspired. By forgetting the schoolroom for the time being and relying upon an awakening of the masses through adult education, we can do much to give the Negro a new point of view with respect to economic enterprise and group cooperation. The average Negro has not been sufficiently miseducated to become hopeless. Our minds must become sufficiently developed to use segregation to kill segregation. All right. Our minds must become sufficiently developed to use segregation to kill segregation and thus bring to pass that ancient and yet modern prophecy, the wrath of a man shall praise thee. If the Negro in the ghetto must eternally be fed by the hand that pushes him into the ghetto, he will never become strong enough to get out of the ghetto. Read that again. Okay, if the Negro in the ghetto must eternally be fed by the hand that pushes him into the ghetto, he will never become strong enough to get out of the ghetto. Stop relying on the government. That's basically what, stop it, because they're going to keep you stranded. And some people are just happy being there. This assumption of Negro leadership in the ghetto, then, must not be confined to matters of religion, education, and social uplift. It must deal with such fundamental forces in life as make these things possible. If the Negro area, however, is to continue as a district supported wholly from without, the inept dwellers therein will merit and will receive only the contempt of those who may occasionally catch glimpses of them in their plight. And then it says, as Frederick Douglass said in 1852, it is vain that we talk of being men if we do not work of men. Most melanated men out here can do a whole lot of talking on these podcasts, but they're not doing the work. We must become valuable to society in other departments of industry than those servile ones from which we are rapidly being excluded. We must show that we can do as well as they. When we can build as well as live in houses, when we can make as well as wear shoes, when we can produce as well as consume wheat, corn, and rye, then we shall become valuable to society. This is why they don't value us, because we don't produce anything. We're not owners. We're not building our own houses. We're not having our own banks. We don't have our own hospitals. We don't have our own sports leagues. We don't own any freaking thing. I was about to cuss y'all because it's sickening. Society, continued Douglas, is a hard-hearted affair. With it, the helpless may expect no higher dignity than that of paupers. That's how they look at us. The individual must lay society under obligation to him, or society will honor him only as a stranger and sojourner. All right. And you all, that is the miseducation of the Negro. And then it's on to chapter 11, the need for service rather than leadership. But I'm going to stop it right there because I think that was sufficient enough for you to understand where, he's going with this book. If you would like to get a copy, this is my Kindle version. I got this off of Amazon, and I'm trying to see who it was written by. Let me see if I can look it up. If you would like to donate, feel free to hit the Cash App, you all. It is Cash App BGAB Clothing. Again, that is Cash App BGAB Clothing. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And in the meantime, we're going to go out to a brief commercial. Support the brand. It's BGAB Clothing. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's BGAB_TV. All right, everyone. So the author of this book is Carter G. Woodson. If you would like to look it up, you can also get this book in a hardback, or you can, like I said, order it off of Amazon. It was originally published in 1933, And that is very amazing, you all, because my grandmother was born in 1939. So I can just only imagine that was a couple of decades ago. That was not that long ago that this book was written, to be honest. Okay. I'm talking about my grandmother, not my great grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1939. And so this book came out in 1933, which basically means that, what was that, like a hundred years ago? So just a couple of generations ago this was going on, and this is still prevalent today. Where are melanated people getting? When we think about society, we have to really focus on what's important out here. And you all, I just, hopefully you've gained something from this. I know this is not celebrity gossip. I know I'm not talking about, all the latest things going on with Jeannie Mai and Jeezy. But really, does Jeezy care about this stuff? Does Jeannie Mai care? She's Asian. She doesn't care. She's fine. The Asian people stick together. Melanated people don't. I don't think they'll ever stick together. So we're so individualistic. Even the Africans, they live well. They come over here and live well. Every other ethnic race comes over to America on this indigenous land that we are supposed to have and live better than us. They get more money than us. They get more opportunities, more resources are afforded to them. While we sit here and struggle, this land was built off the backs of our blood, sweat, and tears and our ancestors, and we get treated like peasants. So I think this actually is far more important than a freaking Jeannie Mai and a freaking Jeezy situation. Who cares about their marriage? Do they care about your marriage? Do they care about your relationship status? Do they care if you're out here struggling to make a living? No, I don't think so. Do they care if your child is illiterate and can't read? What is Jeezy telling your children to do in the rap lyrics? I mean, so just think about it, y'all. Shout out to the brown girls are beautiful out here. Shout out to all my melanated queens, the ultimate warriors, you all. And shout out to yours truly, CEO and founder of Brown Girls Are Beautiful, because we're all about economic literacy and we're all about just being literate in general. Our children need to have literacy, and they need to be able to do simple math, at least add, subtract, divide, multiply, percentages, fractions, division, just they should be able to at least do that much, you all. And they simply cannot do it. So I think that's where we need to start, is educating the children with the basics. And then we need to also teach them about unity, instead of all this nonsense. Unity and community, you all. That's where it's at. We're not going to get anywhere if we don't do that. But a lot of people don't care. Unfortunately, they don't care. So it hasn't been quite an hour yet, but we're going on 48 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this video here. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and watching. This has been another episode of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. If there are any topics that you wish to talk about, please feel free to reach out to me. Comment in the comment section, like, share, and subscribe. Please do so. Thank you for all my new subscribers. Thank you for all the people who have been with me since day one. And, I'm going to make it a conscious effort to be more consistent on this channel, because I'm really trying to grow this channel. I have multiple channels, but I really, really, really think that the important issues are not being addressed across YouTube as a whole. And a lot of people don't have an interest in things that really impact the melanated female or the melanated family as a whole. And the reason I talk about it so much is because I'm a melanated person that have been through so much, especially living here in America. If I had the chance to break free, I probably would leave and go back and live in Europe. And that's just really how I feel. If not there, somewhere else, because I'm tired of these low vibrational antics here. All right, y'all. Well, without any further ado, you all continue to walk in your divinity, celebrate yourself, and I'll see you next time. All right, everybody, take care. Signing out. What are we going to play? We're going to sign out, y'all. Check me out.